Today's episode of Still Untitled is sponsored by Autodesk Graphic. Graphic is a full-featured app for making icons, illustrations, UI and UX, or anything else you need out of a professional vector design app. Open, edit, and save raster or vector images, layered Photoshop or Illustrator files, CSS, SVG, PDF, and just about any other file format you can think of. You can open an AI file and export a clean CSS code or a web-ready SVG with just a few clicks. It's available on your Mac, phone, and iPad, so you can design without compromise on the go. It's the vector design app you've been waiting for your iPad Pro and Apple Pencil. Visit graphic.com to learn more about Autodesk Graphic or find it in the App Store.
Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Hey guys, we're on a remote.
We are on a remote podcast. This rarely happens. We don't do this enough.
But it's a special remote.
We are in one of the coolest. We're in maybe the coolest thing that's happening in San Francisco right now.
Yeah.
I'm biased, and I'm going to just say that.
Maybe even in the Bay Area or even the country.
Well, you know, we are in a full-size LEM. We're in a full-size.
Lem.
Let me explain. We are at Yerba Buena Arts Center for the Arts, in the middle of Tom Sach's A Space Program show, Europa. And the centerpiece of the show is a full-size lunar lander that Tom and his crew built out of plywood and resin, and we are inside the crew compartment of this, and it is actual size.
It's the whole thing, one-to-one. I've never seen the original LEM. I've only seen it in the footage.
Yeah.
Oh, you never been to the Air and Space Museum?
No.
Oh, Norm.
Been. It's much bigger.
Yeah.
Much bigger, and it's very spacious.
So it's spacious until you realize that Collins and Aldrin and Armstrong spent days in this.
Well, just Armstrong and Aldrin.
Oh, right. I'm
Collins,
sorry. Collins was circling.
Collins was forever alone up in orbit.
My apologies. That's right. So it does feel spacious. It feels like the coolest clubhouse ever.
Yeah.
That's and Norm said, like, what Norm said is right. When you hit the door and see this, the scale is breathtaking.
It's shockingly large.
Because the room is a really good size for it because it makes it feel, I think, probably a little bit bigger even than it is.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the Air and Space Museum where they have an actual backup LEM on display.
Right.
It's in a huge 150-foot high gallery.
So
or something.
it looks small.
It feels tiny.
And we've all built models of LEMs and lunar models, and you always build the little one that goes on top of your Saturn V rocket. But it's not until you stand in front of this that you realize, holy crap, the Saturn V rocket is one of the largest things ever.
And we saw that.
Yeah, so Norm and I mean, in Houston, we were at Johnson Space Center.
Right.
We went and did the full walk around because they have it laid down on its side with the building around it. And I mean, I'd seen the one in Huntsville before when I was a kid, but I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
It is difficult to use words to describe how large those rockets are.
And then you realize that, the technology and the engineering that goes into it.
And I know some people are just listening to this podcast. And
Right.
I hope you're watching the video. But even if you're watching the video, you're only getting a small section of the detail that is put into this replica.
Well, and we will do separate coverage today, which will go up on Tested, of the interior of the LEM and some key parts of this show. We're not going to spoil everything so that you can come and enjoy it yourself. And really, Tom's work, Tom and I are very close. We're very simpatico. We have similarly robust theories of shop ritual, although they vary quite widely. And I love his approach to toolage and space and executing ergonomically designed tool spaces. And this is exemplified in every nook and cranny of this place and of the whole show. So, we've got like bottles of liquor down here. You've got the tools over there. You've got, his zip guns, which are a classic element of his work for many years. Cameras everywhere because the interior of this can be monitored by mission control, which is in another room.
And there's a trailer out on the outside even.
There's a quarantine trailer with the spacesuits in it. So to be clear, in case you don't know about this, Tom Sach is an American sculptor who over the last 10 years has implemented this is the third large-scale space program. It's not a performance, it's a mission. And space program opened at YBCA here last weekend with a Europa landing. So 2 female astronauts got in the quarantine trailer, got suited up, and the suits are spacesuits made out of Tyvek with full cooling suits and like reciprocating
Bubble domes?
diastolic pumps and bubble helmets.
So when
and
you're saying
everything.
a replica spacesuit, is it like the replicas you have, or made in the aesthetic and the materials of this project?
It's made in the materials of Tom's project, so
helmets are
it's
behind us.
Tyvek and it's resin and it's gaffer tape. Here is one of the helmets. This is foam core and epoxy resin, and
It looks like there's a fiberglass shell inside, maybe.
no,
that's the gold.
It's
Oh,
fiberglass
wow.
outside and a gold visor that you can actually kind of see through if you really needed to.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a veracity to the home builtness of it. It's like a 10-year-old kid with a 45-year-old man's budget, right?
And time and imagination. It's the logical conclusion of the cardboard spaceship
It is.
we all
and
built.
So the 2 astronauts were led from the quarantine trailer in a scissor lift all the way here to the LEM, where they climbed in, they made some dinner, they did system checks with mission control, they took off. They landed on Europa using the old Atari Lunar Lander game, which is over there.
Oh my god, that's
That's
of
what that
course.
is.
I'm like,
I want to know how much training went into the because that's not an easy game.
There's a lot of training. There's actually a significant amount of training in the lead up to a space program. I was a member of the space team. I was a member of the mission control team. I operated special effects, which meant that I operated the special effects for leaving the Earth and arriving on Europa. And
played
the special
Kubrick's
effect,
role.
Yes, and
Played
this,
what?
Kubrick.
Well, yes. So this is when we're leaving Earth. Basically, there's a security camera facing up, and hanging above it is a globe on a string, and I push a button, and the globe gets wound up on the string, and the camera shot looks like we're leaving Earth. And when we're approaching Europa, it's the same thing in reverse.
That's amazing.
So how serious he takes the construction and the attention to detail is also in the procedures.
Absolutely, and the work is real. I don't mean to say that it's real space exploration, but I mean the amount of system checks and people having to cooperate with each other for this to run smoothly is absolutely analogous to NASA and what they do. And it's exemplified by the fact that many NASA employees, including my friend Dave Lavery, are huge fans of Tom. They have given him lots of support and advice and material ideas over the years. Which led to actually one of my favorite moments this weekend. So the performance of Space Program lasted almost 6 hours, 5 hours.
Wow.
On Saturday.
And that's everything led up to that landing, that mission.
Exactly. So once they landed on Europa, they explored around. They found a Noguchi sculpture. Tom was able to get a sculpture lent by the Noguchi Museum, where he had a show earlier this year in Long Island City, New York. And then they found an ice pond, which Tom had built with his crew as a koi pond, but he used refrigeration techniques to freeze over the top. And then they needed to drill through the ice, so they had a hole saw. And the hole saw was chucked into a drill, and the astronauts laid a ladder over the ice hole, and they put the drill down, and they started drilling. And the drill was going fine, and then they paused for a couple of minutes, and of course the drill froze into place.
Oh no.
So the drill freezes into place, and the astronauts in these bulky suits who are asking for coolant changes, so the Grumman employees are coming over and changing out the igloo in their backpack for fresh ice. It's brilliant.
Oh, is this the coolant rig that you guys built?
No,
Okay.
totally different.
Totally different. Okay.
Well, what was that like? Was that the were those alien? Like what was in that story? Who was changing the ice?
Oh, so it was Grumman employees.
Okay.
So the astronauts would just say, "Grumman, can I get a change on my coolant?" And the Grumman employees would
Okay,
come up,
got it.
lift their backpack while they were working.
Got it.
So the drill is stuck in the ice, and I can see that there's some struts on the drill bit, and I can see they're using a wrench or a handle as like a J-bar to wedge, to sort of try and move the drill bit. But they're using it at the top of these struts, and I realized it'd be better if they
Yeah.
used it at the bottom. So I radio. I'm like 10 feet from mission control,
Yeah.
but I radio. Mission control, this is special effects. And Sam Ratanarat, who was Capcom, says, "Go special effects." I said, "Be advised that the better torsion will be gotten if the J-bar is placed on the surface of the drill bit rather than up the shaft." And then Gaver Tully, who is the founder and head of Brightworks School, the Tinker School based on making here in the Mission District in San Francisco, waved over to Tom. They know each other, and Tom said, "Do you have a suggestion?" And Gaver started to talk, and Tom said, "Come up here and say it into the microphone."
That's
so
amazing.
Gaver gets on the microphone and says, and now the astronauts team mission was called Shackleton 1, which is great because they're going to the ice planet.
Right.
Okay.
So Gaver gets on and says, without missing a beat, Shackleton 1, this is Brightworks Control. We have advice for removing the drill from the thing. And then Adam Stelzer from JPL, the mission commander of Curiosity, gets up on stage, and he and Tom and I and Gaver and Tomasi all start to problem solve getting this drill out of the ice, and it takes us about half an hour. Many of the struts are breaking. There's a whole crowd of people watching and monitors all over the galleries. And when we actually got through the ice, the crowd went ballistic. I mean, it's more than performance. It really is a mission, and the audience is involved on this level, finds themselves involved in the work on this level that's really thrilling.
The same way that when NASA goes on missions and we're glued to the live stream or all unplanned.
Absolutely.
It's like you literally had we have this thing needs to connect to this thing.
It
Here's
was
all
the
the stuff we
Apollo
have
13
available
moment.
to
It was
us.
precisely
That's
that.
incredible.
Yeah. And, again, part of, I think, I don't mean to speak for Tom, but I think part of his aesthetic is the barely controlled chaos. Right? It is trying to grab order out of chaos constantly. And the space program is a way of creating a system that is semi-chaotic, that requires problem solving on the fly. And that was what it was, exemplified times 100. It was really, really thrilling to be a part of it.
Now,
That's awesome.
in the lead up to this mission, you also visited Tom in his studio in New York. You wrote a big feature story for Wired magazine about the building and planning, about his work. How much does he live in this environment, during construction? Like, if a kid builds a playhouse or a treehouse, it is someplace they sleep in and inculcate themselves in and embed themselves in.
He has slept in here. He
All
has lived himself in here for here and there. This LEM is, again, giant. It's over 25 feet tall. It is unique, except for the original LEMs, in that it is actually supported by its 4 landing pads. It has no cheater post in the middle, like most display LEMs around the world.
You're saying it could fall over at any minute.
No, I'm saying it has a massive welded steel infrastructure.
Yeah,
and so it's in many parts. It's stored in a storage warehouse. And it comes out here in a bunch of trucks. It's a huge endeavor. So Tom and his team were here for more than a month in San Francisco, getting all these things in, getting them up, getting all the systems running. The amount of cabling for video throughout this whole gallery is gobsmacking. It's a massive endeavor.
Do they only do the one mission, or are there more than that?
There will be another couple of missions.
Okay.
There'll be another mission, I think, in December, and another major gallery mission in January.
Okay.
The YBCA actually impromptu did a Facebook live stream of the landing of the mission on Saturday, and 65,000 people tuned in.
Yeah, and that's gonna be archived, so you guys can watch that.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Words can't really do it justice. We're sitting here, and all 3 of us came in, and we're just like,
I mean, my first question was, do I get to climb up the ladder?
Right, I know.
Yeah, we entered in this capsule through a ladder up the side where the camera is right now, climbed in through
right behind
there.
Yeah.
And then there's a hatch here for the lower stage.
Yeah. And there's all these air tanks down there, and all the electricity, and also all sorts of camera switching equipment.
Well, it reminds me of, back as a kid when you buy the fake, like the kitchen, the fake stove, and there are knobs that you can turn, and you want to open every drawer. You want to get right past that surface level attention to detail for the interactivity.
Yes.
Here you have many layers of interaction where looking at it, you see the detail, but you know that those cables are functional. The power here is functional.
Everything here is functional. There's nothing that's a fake part of something. It may be part of a play system. For instance, there's an Al Green tape cassette that will play Al Green, and that's one of the system checks. Check the Al Green cassette. Al Green is go.
Just in
check
case.
Al Green.
Well, and like the power, so his power buses are power strips that have a toggle for each power port on the power
So
strip.
they can
Plug on the power
troubleshoot
strip
very efficiently.
Yeah, like it's. I mean, I assume that's the restroom.
No, this is water check and liquor check.
Okay.
I guess one could relieve oneself in there, but there is, in fact, an
glad I
incinerator
didn't
toilet
embarrass
down on
myself.
the level below.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Where actually a key part of the mission is that the astronauts pull off a caulking gun and some fecal simulant and actually utilize the toilet. They make a reasonable loaf, which they pinch with scissors, clean with toilet paper, and put back on the rack.
Just to test. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you're right. You asked before if it takes training. It does take training. And if you want to, in San Francisco, this show will be up through January. If you want to participate in space training, up in the front of YBCA, there is Logjam Cafe, which is part of this exhibit. Tom has a coffee truck where you can order lattes and some snacks, but also Logjam is what Tom calls that bin full of all the unsorted bolts and screws and washers and crap.
Okay. Like the scrap pile.
Right, which is it's both too valuable to throw away and not worth sorting.
Yeah.
And so it's a key part of shop ritual. I do this all the time. Every now and then you just pull out that bucket and you sort it and you put it away. And at Logjam, the general public can participate in getting down a tray that sorts, let's say, self-tapping screws into pan heads, cab heads, etc. And then you sit there and and each level you move up, you matriculate through the training of Logjam.
It's brilliant because it solves a real shop problem.
Yes.
At the same time, it makes interactive art.
It does, and you know, as someone who's had shops for 25 years, I can tell you that there's that aspect of too valuable to throw away, not worth sorting. There's a lovely zen in coming into your shop in the morning and just, you know, you do it with your cables and with other stuff.
I have a 6-gallon tub of cables that I'm going to bring down here, put in the Logjam Cafe, and let the people, let the art decide.
So you said that this is not the first mission space program Tom's done. What happens to this? Does it all become part of like a museum, just like NASA puts their LEM and replicas in museums? What happens to this playset?
I think it's entirely possible that the LEM and large parts of space program could be acquired by a museum, by an art museum for display. In the meantime, you know, he did his first. I think the first performance was the first mission was at the Gagosian Gallery, and then there was a mission at the Armory in New York. Where they actually carved up the floor of the Armory with chainsaws.
I thought the Gagosian was where they carved up the floor.
They also carved up the floor with a jackhammer at the Gagosian in L.A.
Okay.
And just like a lunar mission, every single sample that they gather from the gallery space gets serial numbered, tagged, bagged, and put in a vessel and stored as part of the mission. You might call it detritus. Tom actually calls it bricolage, and it is his name for all of the ancillary pieces and bits of the story made extant by the object, right? So each one of, like, every fingerprint and bit of dirt and pencil mark on this is part of the work being made entirely clear. And we've talked about Tom's work a lot on the podcast and on Tested before, but this whole aspect of the plywood is painted on both sides but not on the edge, so you see everything's plywood.
That's one of the bullets.
One of the bullets is you only paint plywood before you cut it, not after. And that's part of making the story of its construction extant in the construction itself.
Well, it's the work is visible, I think, is the maybe oversimplification.
But people made this.
The thing. So I'm sure I know you guys have both seen The Gods Must Be Crazy, but that was to me the first time I was introduced to the idea of a cargo cult. Right. And in a lot of ways, what Tom does with Space Program is if a non-technical, non-scientific person saw you know, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin jumping out of the lunar lander on TV and then wanted to do that themselves and came back and recreated it as best they could with the tools and the knowledge that were available to them.
And the knowledge gets better and the tools get better.
But the impulse is the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that the thing that you made me realize by your phrasing there is what's being exemplified in this is the very small leap from human ambition to the most remarkable executions of that ambition. Going to another planet and stepping on that planet is astounding, and it's done with the same level of enthusiasm that Tom and his team are doing this, as exemplified by Adam Stelter getting up and getting right in and saying this is exactly what it's actually like. It's this hard to talk to astronauts from mission control and figure out what the hell's going on.
They didn't simulate time lag, I guess.
They didn't simulate time. No, that would have taken a long time.
That
It's
might make it
between
a little
14 and 30 minutes between here and Europa.
Yeah,
14 and
Europa's around
25
Jupiter,
minutes.
right? Yeah, it's a long time.
Oh God, it's even longer. Right,
Yeah.
right. Sorry. Yeah, it's a long time.
And when we were talking
I'm
about
sure.
earlier,
Thank you for correcting me in the comments. Appreciate it.
I was hoping like the way it's documented too. Yes, it's Facebook live stream, but hopefully they document in the same way that NASA documents in terms of recording all the audio.
Absolutely.
And that
All
type
of
of film footage.
Well, and if you'd like to really experience it, there's a beautiful film that Tom made with Van Neistat called A Space Program. That is the Armory show.
Okay.
And it encompasses parts of 10 Bullets. It encompasses the space training. It encompasses the. It's going to sound facetious for me to say that they attack this as if it's life and death, but they really do. And the fact is that when you were a kid and you were pressing when I was a kid and I was pressing buttons on my mission control briefcase, I was fully invested in what that felt like and the responsibility given to me by the fiction I was creating.
You weren't pressing random buttons. You were
No.
pressing the buttons that you had to press at that moment, and it was life or death.
And the same thing is happening here. And that leap from the pretend to the work being actually real and thus the enthusiasm is a much narrower gap than you think it is.
And both from the performance, from the astronauts who are on the mission to the people watching it, it mirrors everything that you would feel, what the astronauts would feel, or us watching NASA missions would feel.
Absolutely.
The whole
and
relationship.
the astronauts get cranky. These two girls wore those suits for these two women. Excuse me. They wore those suits for almost 4 hours.
That's a long,
As
you know.
Yeah, no, that is brutal. And they're getting cranky. Sometimes they're not doing everything that Mission Control is asking. Mission Control's getting cranky. There's a famous
Space Lab.
Gemini mission where the astronauts yanked off all their telemetry because they were tired of NASA asking them, "Why is your heart rate up?" and crap like that. I mean, all that's extant within this framework.
You know the Space Lab story, right?
Which is that?
Space
The
Lab
mutiny.
2 or 3, I can't remember which one, mutinied. And they basically said, "Look, we're not working for the next day or two."
Right. Yes.
On
Yes.
New
Because
Year's,
you
yeah.
guys have been working us too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's why they have now 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's why they have a normal work
And-
schedule.
yeah.
Predictable work schedule, at least.
I think we've talked a lot about this. I just want to talk a little bit about what I did last night because I did something really cool.
Oh, yeah. So, Adam, you flew back this morning to make this podcast.
did.
You were in
I
LA
got-
over the weekend or
It
yesterday,
is,
yeah.
It's 10 a.m. right now. I got up at 5:30 this morning and just actually a tad late, and just made it to LAX in time to catch my flight to get here. I had some meetings in LA yesterday, which was the primary reason I was there, and those were awesome. I saw my friends at Whale Rock, but I also went last night to see Michael Giacchino conduct the orchestra to play the music from Lost. Against clips from Lost, and Carlton Cuse was there, Sawyer was there, I sat next to Penny, Bernard was also there. I'm naming all these people by their character names. It was a really, really great evening. It was at the Ford Theater, which is an outdoor theater in Los Angeles.
Okay.
It was gorgeous. The wind was really, really blustery. So at intermission, they had to actually take down the movie screen that they were projecting the show on because during the performance, so the screen is obviously rigged and to a truss work, and it's roped on top, and on the bottom it's also roped. But when the wind's blowing really strong, you don't want it to be perfectly secured because then you put too much stress on the framework.
Yeah.
So the union guys there with the ropes were actually letting it out so that it could actually take some of the wind, and so the screen is literally like blowing up in the middle of this orchestra playing the music from Lost. I have a clip of them playing Smoke Monster music while the screen is moving around.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we talked because you went to the Star Trek Beyond premiere where they played the score for that live.
Again, Michael Giacchino's
score. But we also talked about before about how much music there is for TV. And you can make themes for characters, the new characters get introduced, but every week, during the season, he's scoring the episode as they're editing it. And so it's a lot of music. So my question is, was this for the fans, or was it for him to relive his favorite music from this whole?
Oh, it's actually very specific. He and Carlton Cuse, Carlton Cuse was the showrunner of Lost alongside Damon Lindelof. Damon was supposed to be there, but was stuck, unfortunately, in Australia. There were some floods, and he had trouble getting back.
Oh boy.
But Carlton and Michael were very clear that this was for the fans. It was only the third time that the music had ever been produced live.
Wow.
There were so many interesting things that they talked about. They took questions from the audience. So, Lost, like one of my all-time favorite movies, Once Upon a Time in the West, every character in Lost had their own theme.
Mm-hmm.
And those themes weaved together in different ways. There was 121 hours of Lost, something like that. Somewhere over 100 hours of the show.
Right.
For that, Michael wrote over 50 hours of orchestral music.
Wow.
In 6 years. He's literally scoring shows for 22 to 25 weeks a year for 6 years with a full orchestra every week, back to back, no stopping. There was no time for the producers to come and block through where music should go, so Michael's just winging it, and he's just like writing and writing and writing. They actually read some of the scripts for the audience, and one of them is, so they played. It's emotional. They played Charlie's. Spoiler alert! They
His
played
farewell.
Charlie's death scene.
Not Penny's boat, the floating away.
So they play, and the thing was that because they're writing these scripts in.
Hold on, I'm gonna fix you here.
Sorry. Oh,
You're
thank you.
okay.
Because they're writing these scripts in Hawaii, they shot almost 99.9% of the show in Hawaii, but they're scoring it in LA. The scripts were written very emotionally, so that everybody else knew what the writers were really trying to get. So the Charlie death scene is really intensely written, where it says, as the water gets up to his neck, Charlie grabs a Sharpie and writes a last note on his hand and holds it up. Desmond looks at it. He can't. Not Penny's boat. What? He said.
And to experience that scene with just the music and the reading of a script is completely different than watching the scene.
Totally.
Because
Well, so they read it before they played it. They're not reading it alongside.
because you're also going through the composer's head and musician's head, how they interpret and funnel the creative story into emotion.
Right, exactly. So they're giving Giacchino the emotions that he wants to hit. So the script then says, it says something like, and now Giacchino writes something really soft and sad because of all the deaths we've witnessed. We know that this one's going to hurt the most.
Yeah.
Oh, and then they play the scene and it just kills you, and it's like layer after layer of elegiac beauty. And then they played Smoke Monster. They played the whole last. They played the open. They opened with the opening title sequence of the pilot, which is still one of the greatest pilots ever. They closed it with the last sequence of Jack and his dad talking, and in a hilarious bit of confluence, I spent the morning hanging out with Lloyd Braun,
Of course.
who is the former head of ABC, whose idea Lost came out of.
Yes. What a way to bookend that day.
Yeah, he has a real connection to the show that I don't think we're supposed to talk about, but I don't remember.
No. Lloyd was on a retreat with executives at ABC when he conceived of the idea of Lost, hired Damon Lindelof and hired J.J. Abrams and Damon to come up with a treatment, and ended up shooting the most expensive pilot in television history at that point. I think over $10 million.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, he got fired for spending so much on the pilot, and then Lost was a runaway hit.
Yeah.
Yep. Cultural phenomenon.
Hollywood.
Life moves in strange ways.
But when you mention that music, it reminds me people should watch the latest episode of Every Frame a Painting, which is just about scores.
Wonderful.
I saw that at XL.
And it's specifically about Marvel movies, but about the effect that temp music has on the storytelling, and directors, how they edit around that type of temporary music, and how that affects the final music.
Right.
That's so different than when you have one composer who is definitely part of the creative process. When they're writing the script for that episode with Charlie, and they mention, okay, Giacchino, let him do his thing here, because they're trusting him, because he's the collaborator.
And that's the thing that really comes out when you start to hear the producers and writers of Lost talk about it. It sounds like the hardest thing that any of them ever did. It was an unwieldy, grueling slog for years where, Damon talks about the tyranny of, you finish the script, you deliver it, bang, right now you got to turn another one around in 6 days. And yet... everyone taking responsibility for their piece of it. Michael in L.A. and the crew in Hawaii and the actors finding their, many times the scripts didn't exist until the moment they're shooting them. They're looking at their sides, brand new, right there, and having to pick up and run with it. And what a result! I'm personally, just so if in case you wanted to know, I'm a huge fan of the end of Lost. I think the ending is exactly the emotional moment that I felt like I wanted. I understand everybody's objections about whether it was a science fiction show or a soap opera. I get it. I see it. I loved that show. I've watched the whole thing twice.
There you go. I think that's
wow, you ended on a very controversial note.
Yeah, I'll bet that'll get more comments than Space Program.
If we can talk about art, no. It's what else? Anything else you want to get off your chest? Do you feel like the moon landings were a hoax?
I want to go back to one of the things I talked about in my TED Talk this year was that I built a spaceship in my mom's closet when I was 10 years old, and how important that was in the makeup of my play and how I created the realities that gave me succor as a lonely kid. And I'm here, and it feels like a culmination. Like this is the culmination of every kid playing in their closet and sort of imagining other worlds and other realities.
I want to go stand at the window with my arms on the armrests and look out from the Buzz Aldrin side.
And when you do, you'll be astounded at how difficult their view was, because that's real. Everything about the topography in this is actual.
Well, and this is a thing you're never gonna get to go inside one of the LEM trainers, right? Like Norm and I got to go inside the shuttle trainer when we were in Houston, and it was a highlight of my life because we're sitting there, it's the actual real cockpit. We're greased up in the seats, and that is the closest I'm going to get to being a real astronaut.
It's a sense of space, a sense of it's
like it's an infinity of switches and controls. Mm-hmm. And this is the moon. The only thing that I would like to do more than the shuttle is to sit in an LEM. And since none of the real ones exist anymore, and the trainers and the backups are all, they belong in museums. They're not going to let sweaty nerds in to noodle around with those.
I think that's a sign on the front.
Yeah.
But as I said, a space program will be here at the Yerba Buena Arts Center through January. It's open to the public, and it's an amazing show, and you should come see it.
Yeah, you may find us wandering.
I have a. Is this going up next week?
This is going up next week. Yes.
So I'm going. If you're going to be at World Maker Faire in New York, I am unexpectedly going to be there.
Oh, excellent. I was just. I had lunch with Dale the other day. He was on his way.
Oh, cool. So Dan Shapiro of Glowforge has a personal emergency and needed somebody to come in and help them run their panel. So they're taking me to New York, and I'm going to ask questions and talk about Glowforges, I assume. So
very cool.
Find me there if you want to come say hi.
Cool. And then we'll also be at New York Comic Con the week after.
On the 7th.
Yes.
Friday the 7th.
So stay tuned for that. Wow.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot going on, and we're podcasting from
space. We are podcasting from space.
Yeah. Mission Control, we have completed our podcast, waiting further instructions over.
See you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks again to Autodesk Graphic for sponsoring today's episode. Graphic is a full-featured app for making icons, illustrations, UI and UX, or anything else you'd need out of a professional vector design app. It's available for your Mac, phone, and iPad, so you can design without compromise on the go. It's the vector design app you've been waiting for your iPad Pro and Apple Pencil. Visit graphic.com to learn more about Autodesk Graphic, or just find it in the App Store. We'll see you next week.